So with that, I'm going to transition us to our corporate panel. I'm really excited about the conversation that is in front of us. I don't get to do the honors. I thought I would get somebody who is even more masterful than me in talking about innovation in life sciences, and that is our good partner, Dave Whelan from BioscienceLA. We have lots of incredible collaboration partners in the ecosystem, and Bioscience and Dave is certainly at the top of the list. If you're not familiar with BioscienceLA, Dave will probably tell you more about it, but they are, I think, really define themselves as the definitive catalyst organization for life sciences and healthcare innovation in the greater Los Angeles area. They really are here to diversify and amplify science and accelerate collaboration in the biotech area. And Dave's an incredible guy. He has a symbolic systems degree from Stanford, which I think is in Northern California, but fortunately has an MBA from UCLA. So we're going to still call him one of our own. And I think he's done a great job building BioscienceLA, and we kind of are here kind of supporting him in his work, and I know he supports ours, and it's that type of collaboration that really elevates the ecosystem. So Dave, I'm excited to welcome you. I'm excited to listen to your panel. I think we have a number of rock star panelists, so I'm going to be on the edge of my seat, and so thanks for stepping in, and thank you more importantly for the partnership we have with BioscienceLA.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Andy, and thanks for a great day so far. I guess we're in the home stretch of today, but this has been an awesome day. I just wish I had been able to be on everything, but it's been great to hear some of the talks today, and some incredible companies. So just really quickly, I think Andy gave really the full introduction, so I'm not going to go into too much more detail, but BioscienceLA is a 2-year-old nonprofit organization designed to really grow the life sciences ecosystem here in the region, grow funding, grow space, grow talent, and most importantly, grow awareness, working in collaboration with organizations like the Alliance, working with companies and organizations, some of which are on the panel today. Certainly Alexandria is a close partner and collaborator, and I've worked with Jlabs and Illumina over the years. So this is really a terrific group today, and want to dive into the panel so we can make sure we have time for my questions, and then hopefully time for audience questions. So anyone who's out there on Whova, please feel free to leave some questions there, and I'm going to be trying to juggle multiple devices so I can see what's happening on Zoom and Whova. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the panel, and we'll kick off with hopefully the easiest question of the day that I will give you, which is just quick introduction, who you are, what you do, and then since we're talking about kind of the academic licensing world, connections between academia and corporate, maybe dig back a little bit and tell us a little bit about at least one of the schools you went to, and if you're still doing business with them today, and if you're not, you don't need to tell us why. But anyway, I'm gonna do this alphabetically by first name. So Ajay Nirula from Eli Lilly, tell us a bit about yourself.
Thanks, Dave, and thanks for having me today. So it's great to be here today. So my name's Ajay Nirula. I'm the therapeutic area head of immunology for Eli Lilly, and I'm also the head of our San Diego site. What I do at Lilly is I really oversee a lot of our research in immunology in the discovery space, but a lot of the clinical research also, so phase 1 and phase 2 clinical research. I'm a physician scientist by training, trained in internal medicine and rheumatology, and I have deep academic ties to the University of California dating back to undergrad, so Berkeley, then UCLA for medical school, and then UCSF for some of my fellowship training, and I spent a few years on faculty there, and really have great strong ties to a lot of those institutions as well as a lot of other institutions. I mean, I'll highlight, just this last year, I've also been the medical lead for Lilly's work on COVID and our work on COVID therapeutic antibodies. And so has had some very strong ties with UCLA and some of the clinical work. Also we've really set up some very good relationships with UCSF over the last few years. So we're doing a lot of collaborative work on immunology and just in the last year on COVID. So it's great to be here today.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And we'll maybe dig a bit more into some of those COVID-related collaborations, since I think that's still, we're one day into California opening, so I think we can still talk about how we got there. So next up, Amanda, and really excited to Amanda Cashin from Illumina for Startups. And I've worked with Illumina for 10, 11 years, going back to buying a bunch of sequencers at New York Genome Center many years ago. So excited to, and watching the accelerator grow over that time. So looking forward to hearing more about what you are working on.
Hi, thanks, Dave. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for arranging this discussion today. So I'll quickly introduce myself. My name is Amanda Cashin. I'm based in San Francisco. I head up Illumina for Startups and Illumina Accelerator, which is sort of our way of partnering with entrepreneurs and venture capitalists to help grow the innovation ecosystem around genomics and multi-omics technologies. Based in the Bay Area, but I do have Southern California roots. I did my PhD in chemistry, chemical biology at Caltech, and I worked before Hallie, but I worked at Alexandria for a number of years in the Pasadena office of Alexandria, the headquarters there. And I do spend a little bit of time personally at Caltech with the biology department, working on a couple of initiatives there. So my heart does have a place for Southern California as well. How does Illumina Accelerator and Illumina for Startups work with universities? It's really around trying to pull startups out of these universities, whether it's connecting with the PI and encouraging them to create a company, like we recently did with a new startup that's coming out of University of Texas, or just backing great entrepreneurs that are coming out of academia or have recently kind of graduated from academia. We have not yet too many investments in Southern California, but we do have a couple. We've made a couple of investments in San Diego, and we're talking to a company out of LA right now. So we'll see. But there's a lot of different ways Illumina, as a corporate, though, partners with universities, and so we can talk a little bit about that. But my domain is mostly on the startup world.
Awesome, thank you. And I will say that we have a BioFutures internship program that we kicked off this year, and Prenome is sort of half in the Bay Area and half in LA, and they have an intern coming on board right now. So it's exciting. Yeah,
it's one of our current portfolio companies.
Yeah, here now. Excited to make that connection. And you did a perfect job of pre-introducing Hallie as well. So Hallie Kuhn from Alexandria Venture Investments. Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Thanks, Amanda. So I'm Hallie Kuhn. I'm a vice president on our science and technology team for Alexandria. Alexandria's core business is lab real estate. So we have about 38 million square feet in operating lab developments, another 10 to 15 million in the pipeline. And we also have a very active corporate investment arm, which is where I sit. So I help oversee our investments both in LA and San Diego, overseeing kind of life science investments from early to late stage, and across, therapeutics, research tools, pretty broad. We really look to support the most exciting companies, in the ecosystems and where we help build out these clusters. I think on the academic side, so personally in terms of my own connection, so I did my PhD at Harvard, but I actually did my undergrad just down the road at Harvey Mudd College in Claremont, and actually Maria Clave, the president, is on the board of the SoCal Alliance, so a nice connection there, and just a really tremendous engineering school. And then, in my current role, we work very closely with the academic institutions. So Caltech is just down the road. I consider them friends and family, as well as, our partners at UCLA. They just had kind of the wonderful LA Best event a few weeks ago, and then on the ground in San Diego as well with UCSD, Scripps and Salk. So, we really see research institutions as the engines that drive biotech clusters, right? And that's where the intellectual capital is coming from. That's where serial entrepreneurs really kind of often begin their careers, right? So not just supporting the science coming out of those universities, but also, the scientific founders who want to be part of those companies. So we see it, as really being a critical component of everything we do, both on the investment and real estate side.
My mute thing works there. Awesome. Thank you so much, Hallie. Michelle Kim Danely from Autobahn Labs. And I'm just remembering that you and I met at a scene that was almost as stunning as the background behind you at Eric Topol's genomics conference several years ago. But since then, you've joined Autobahn, which is a great new entrant in this whole corporate innovation licensing space, so corporate commercialization space. So tell us a bit more.
Thanks again, Dave, and to the Alliance for inviting me here. This looks like a really great panel, so I'm excited to speak more and learn from others. So again, my name is Michelle Danely. I am SVP of Operations over at Autobahn Labs, and we're a novel model. We're a virtual incubator that was formed in partnership between a venture fund, Samsara Biocapital, that's based in the Bay Area, Evotech, which is a drug discovery and development organization based in Germany, and KCK Group, which is a single family office. So really our model is to partner with large institutions and to create a systematic mechanism by which we can set up jointly owned new companies that are leveraging technologies out of academic labs. And so really our focus is on therapeutics. We're primarily actually targeting in a very focused way single asset companies that could be applicable to a small handful of indications. And really, we have a streamlined mechanism to advance these programs through work being done at Evotech to de-risk and add value, create intellectual property, and ultimately to get these companies to a Series A, which ideally one of our investors will take the lead in. With respect to my academic connections, so my PhD is actually in biochemistry and molecular biophysics from Columbia, and my undergrad is from Cornell, so not really super relevant to this audience and this geography. But I am happy to announce that our flagship partnership that we launched with last June, it's almost exactly a year ago, was with UCLA. Subsequently, we signed deals with UCSF and UCSD, and most recently with Cold Spring Harbor. I personally am based in Santa Barbara, so I really have roots settled down here in Central and Southern California, so really excited to become part of this ecosystem.
Awesome, thank you so much. And last but not least, Sanjay Mistry from Jlabs. You know the drill at this point.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dave and the Alliance. Thank you for the invitation, and well, nice to meet the panel of panelists as well. Looking forward to this afternoon. So Sanjay Mistry, head of Jlabs here in San Diego currently. Jlabs, founded in 2012, and since that time we've gone global. We've got 10 physical sites and 13 total. We've had about 650 companies go through the program, including a number of those being kind of residents. A tremendous growth and innovation opportunity for the entrepreneurial community, and really we focus on enabling entrepreneurs to innovate and allow them to focus their time on translational science while we take care of the rest. And obviously the biggest boon for us as J&J as the parent partner here is looking for opportunities that we can strategically partner on and build relationships back in the business. So it's really great, and it's just so exciting to be down here in San Diego. So myself, I'm a pharmacologist by training, trained out of the UK, Nottingham, and then Aberdeen to do my PhD program. And did fellowships at UPMC in Pittsburgh, and then Scripps here in San Diego. So, and then I did a startup company here as well in the stem cell regeneration space. So I'm coming back to San Diego after 16 years, and I'm bringing back academic, drug development, discovery, business development, venture capital, and all that experience back in. And for me, there's no better ecosystem to be than in San Diego. There's top class universities all around, up and down the region, up through LA. And I think what we've seen in this region of late is just phenomenal. And it's great to be part of that and producing great companies, great job opportunities, and increasing the GDP of the region. So pleasure to be part of the whole mission with the rest of you on this panel here. So pleasure. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sanjay. Really, really appreciate it. And just to connect the dots back with my Illumina conversation, my Jlabs connection is we were after we got all the sequencers going in New York Genome Center, the next big thing we did was work with New York to get Jlabs into New York Genome Center, which is one of my favorite, maybe my favorite Jlab space. Just such a beautiful, beautiful space in New York Genome Center. So, and I clearly I miss being in New York. I'm supposed to be talking about LA, but I miss being on a plane, I think. So it'll happen again soon. Anyway, I want to kind of kick off the conversation high level, because I think what's so great about this panel is that everyone has we're in very different kinds of corporate organizations with very different kinds of relationships to both academic institutions as well as startups. But everyone mentioned, what you're doing to grow technologies and really create innovation and bring innovation to market. And so maybe before we dig into business models, would love to just get a sense of, what does innovation actually mean, at your organization and to your organization? And maybe Sanjay, since you just spoke, we'll kick off there. We'd love to just to hear, what does innovation mean to J&J and to Jlabs?
Yeah, so obviously, dual role here because J&J is our parent company, and obviously innovation matters both within and outside. And I think, in all honesty, right, innovation can't be done in a vacuum. Able to have opportunity to partner both internally and externally. And our whole setup, right, under Johnson & Johnson Innovation, which has Jlabs as part of an incubation arm. Then we've got the innovation centers, which is our partnering arm. We've got JJB, our venture capital arm, and also JBD, which is our business development arm, allows us to really tap innovation in a very different way. And so from our standpoint, having kind of tentacles out in the external environment allows us to access the latest disruptive science that's going on. Right? Innovation can mean much to many different organizations, but fundamentally to us, it's access to the best science, the best talent, and the best entrepreneurial opportunities. And as far as Jlabs, we take many early stages, which are coming straight out of academia, and we really watch them flourish. They come in and then they grow and they get to a Series A and they're off to the races, right? So I think seeing that growth and opportunity is just fantastic. And from us, from a perspective, you get to see science being translated and really get to rationalize how could this fit within our business, etc. That's just some high-level observations from my end of what innovation means to us and the impact of being enabled to access it externally as well for our internal organization.
Perfect. Hallie, would love to get your sense, especially coming from an investment group that is part of a real estate group, which I think realized early on how important innovation is across the entire spectrum of business.
Yeah, I mean, maybe taking a step back, I think, we think about innovation at a pretty holistic level, right? In terms of supporting it within ecosystems more broadly. So within an organization, I think we're always looking for ways that we can kind of stay ahead of the curve and really make sure that we can support these ecosystems in the right ways. New York is very different from LA, it's very different from Boston and San Francisco. So we really have to think on a local level, where is the innovation happening? Where are the gaps to kind of, bridge in order to kind of, build that more, healthy and bustling, right, community. So, I think we kind of look at various components, right? You can break it down. You can think about, what's coming out of the institutions, as we discussed before, but then, the structure around that. So the capital, the actual lab spaces, right, in order for these companies to flourish, right? And, Sanjay and Amanda are great examples, right? They're providing these kind of mini ecosystems, right, for those early stage companies to find a home and have that structure. And without, for instance, that in an ecosystem, it can be really hard for an early stage company to get off the ground. So we tend to like to step through, a variety of those kind of key ingredients and say, what is there, what's not there, and as an organization, how can we fit in and help support it?
Awesome, Michelle, you want to take that, especially since you've got what I think is a very innovative business model that's driving innovation.
Thanks. We're definitely the new kid on this particular block. I'm getting a little bit of echo from someone, but hopefully you all can hear me. So we're a startup ourselves. So in that sense, we're innovative. We've just launched, as I mentioned, a year ago. But I think, you know, as Sanjay and Hallie have alluded to, we're all looking for innovative science, right? Looking for early stage opportunities that are coming out of really cutting edge research out of institutions. I think one of the things in which we're a little bit different and perhaps a bit of a novel addition to the larger ecosystem, which by all means is absolutely necessary. There are many different pieces. And so therefore we need many different stakeholders to weigh in for us all to be successful. But what Autobahn's really looking for are super early stage projects at the cutting edge, right? Things in which a faculty member may have identified a novel piece of biology or science, a new target. They may not have a fair amount of data yet, but we're really looking to access these technologies and opportunities that are possibly 3 to 5 years out from the clinic, due to some of the constraints and the limitations around how typical venture capital can invest. And they're looking for things that are, you know, frequently, classically 12 to 18 months out from the clinic. Things that are 3, 4, 5 years out are much higher risk. They need a lot of you know, de-risking and value creation before it becomes more of a typical venture play and a Series A opportunity. You know, the other way in which I think we're innovative, it's kind of in our genetics. So as I mentioned earlier, our parent venture fund is Samsara Biocapital. And in a way, they've got their own unique model in that they can stay in opportunities, both from the company inception phase all the way through and beyond IPO. So typically a venture fund will stay in just for the privates and exit at the IPO. Samsara's founder was really, you know, cognizant of the opportunity and the possibility for an increased ROI. If you can stay in after an IPO, you get your opportunity to stay in and get a 10 to 30x bump if you're willing to ride the ride. And so on the flip side of that, you know, he was really interested in going much earlier than most funds and most investors and pharma partners are going to go. So I think that's another way in which we're a bit unique. But that being said, I think we're seeing a lot of expansion, a lot of kind of creativity in our world in terms of how to really up level, you know, these amazing scientific discoveries. So, and you know, as Hallie alluded to, there's many of those local and sort of institution specific or geography specific elements of it. So as we've now partnered with 4 different institutions and looking to work with more, we find that we have to be creative, or not have to, get the opportunity to be creative with each one of our institutions. UCLA, for instance, is a very large and prolific organization. It's a large ecosystem there, but it's also very spread out compared to the Bay Area. Cold Spring Harbor probably falls at the opposite end of the spectrum, being an institution with roughly 45 to 50 PIs. It's much more collegial, and it's just a different dynamic. So for us, it's really about finding that right fit and customizing it to each one of our partners so that we can add value, and then we can help them up level and create additional opportunities to commercialize their technology. So I think there's a lot of different ways, as many people have alluded to describe innovation.
Awesome, thanks. And hopefully, as we talk about business models in a little bit, we can come back to sort of, you know, you've now done this four times with very different organizations, and so would love to hear a bit more when we get to that around how some of those shape up differently. Amanda, would love, you know, and you are, I think, famously part of I call it a Southern California hardware company that has evolved into a Northern California, you know, software and services company along the way. And so there's lots of innovation going on within the Illumina business model. But, you know, what do you guys think about innovation broadly?
Yeah, I love this question. I think probably all of us in this room sit at sort of the intersection between sort of like the world of our corporates and the innovation that's sort of going on in-house. And then also sort of the external world of innovation. And so I think that's a really, like, sort of corporate innovators, it's a really hard thing to kind of balance, especially as the companies get bigger, to kind of navigate sort of both of those worlds. They're very different paces, very different sort of energies, all of that. But Illumina, you're right, is a totally innovative company. One of our core values is innovation is in our DNA. And so it's really cool, sort of as a very entrepreneurial driven company and led company for decades. It's really fun to be sort of part of that. And I think because we have such entrepreneurial roots, it's sort of helped us prioritize these sort of external innovation engines like Illumina for startups, or Illumina Accelerator, in partnering with entrepreneurs externally to help them catalyze the market of genomics and beyond. So I think to do corporate innovation, you kind of have to have an entrepreneurial corporate mindset, or at least internal champions that are entrepreneurial to help kind of balance those two challenging worlds. But it's a ton of fun once you can do that. It's really hard. But I know I've been admiring J&J over the years in doing that. And I know Lilly's done some really cool things as well to kind of balance those two worlds. But yeah, I think that's the challenging part. And I think the key to doing that on the external side and partnering with startups or whoever the sort of the external partner is to really find ways to sort of be a good partner. And it sounds so basic, right? Because why partner if you don't want to be a good partner? But sometimes as a big company, you're not always sort of aligned with the other external partners' goals. And so we've been really trying to do that with the Illumina Accelerator since 2014 when we started, was to really kind of be aligned with the co-founders that we invest in and really kind of view ourselves as a co-founder of the startups as well. So we take an equity stake. We're sort of measuring our success based off of the financial return that we get as a shareholder in the companies, which I think makes us align with our co-investors and also the startups as well. And so I think that helps incentivize us to be a good partner. But I think that's sometimes the challenge with corporate innovation is like really making sure that those goals do stay aligned and that you don't do things that will maybe even if it's not intentionally sort of prohibit you from being a good partner or sending signals that maybe one of the groups you're working with is better than the other. So for example, for us, we're working on investing in companies upstream or downstream of Illumina's core sequencing technology. We're purposely not investing in companies that are in our same space because we don't want to acquire them, mostly because we want to sort of expand the opportunities of the field, but also we don't want to sort of send a signal if we acquire one company that the rest of the companies that we've now helped create 54 companies, that they're not also good. And so sort of that negative signals I think corporates can send is something that we're really mindful of to make sure that we're a good partner and that we sort of balance that sort of corporate innovation kind of world that maybe we're kind of probably all thinking about daily.
Awesome. No, thank you. That's terrific. And Ajay, can't not ask you this question. And I'd say, Lilly and J&J might be neck and neck in terms of years of innovation experience, but would love your take on innovation. And I know you also mentioned a little known fact about Lilly's innovation in vaccine distribution, not this year, but many years ago. And so maybe share a bit about that as well.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I love this question also because I think it allows you to back out a little bit from the weeds and kind of look holistically at the concept of innovation. I mean, Lilly is sort of a top 5 global, pharmaceutical company focused on human health. And I think many people, may think of sort of innovation, flourishing at smaller organizations. But I think Lilly's had a bit of a transformation the last 5 years that's been very centered on innovation. And I think one aspect of the innovation is just vision. How do you want to improve human health? And maybe in a focused area in the disease areas where we're working on, what are we trying to achieve? So having that innovative vision, and I think Lilly's core business for many years has been diabetes, but I think shifting from just controlling blood sugar to actually really improving human outcomes and life expectancy and so on. But then in newer areas like oncology, having some of the first personalized therapies for oncology, and Alzheimer's, being one of the first movers to have an important drug. And then in my area, immunology, I think just being the first to treat one of a number of diseases that have no treatments. And I think also in COVID last year, when COVID showed up in March, I was talking to you about this before, Dave. Lilly hadn't been in infectious disease and in vaccines since distributing the polio vaccine for the first time many years ago. But how we looked at how could we innovate and get involved in helping with COVID. I think another important area is, how do we accomplish it? Once you've got that vision, and I think a lot of it is about scientific innovation and technology. So harnessing the best technologies, having the technological courage to go after whatever is needed to tackle a problem is a big part of it. So we've been trying to bring in new technologies in the last few years, including RNA interference, and gene therapy, and some of the technologies we use for COVID. But maybe the most important thing is people and brilliant minds. And I think I think Lilly really wants to harness the most innovative minds. It's a big part of our presence in Southern California. It's sort of a company that started in the Midwest, really trying to have this coastal presence and have a great presence in California, get some of the best minds. But then I think what we'll talk about later is just the ability to connect with the great academic institutions and the great startups up here. That's how we'll accomplish that innovation in the end. So look forward to talking more about that later.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you so much. Great. Again, love just the diversity of this panel and sort of perspectives. And you teed me up well, AJ, in terms of thinking about kind of that academic engagement. And I think there are lots of different ways to build relationships with academia, from from licensing agreements to acquiring technologies, sponsored research, sponsoring and collaborating on events like this, but would love to understand sort of the ways each of your organizations is building or has built relationships. And one question to think about is that how much of that is outbound versus inbound? Meaning, how much of that is your organization going to the universities, physically or virtually, and sort of building those relationships, versus how often are they knocking on your door trying to start something up? And maybe Michelle, I'll kick off with you, because you've got I think just this again sort of new model to share a little bit more about, but and 4 recent case studies to talk about.
Sure. Thanks for the question. And really, it's an interesting one for us. And one of the things that we've figured out, or I think that is a real opportunity for us, is to actually reduce the friction on how you actually get a program or a company started. And so when we partner with an institution, we actually do this in a bit of a unique way that took a little bit of convincing for the tech transfer offices, which is that we have pre-negotiated terms for everything. And so what that accomplishes, obviously, from a practical perspective and a logistical perspective, is it just makes it extremely streamlined, because all of the documents have been pre-negotiated. They're kind of set templates, and we just customize based on the particular science and individuals involved. And so that allows us to kind of spin out these companies very quickly without too much ado, and incorporate something that's jointly owned. So I think that was a super advantageous approach, but it was, as you can imagine, a bit of a lift, because typically these licensing deals operate on a case-by-case basis with relative comps and things of that nature. With respect to how we work with institutions, it's always a blend, and it's really great to be able to be very flexible and fluid about how it works, and if there's push or if there's pull. So I think those are kind of 2 different pedals on the bike, if you will, right? So obviously, when we were looking at the institutions with whom we wanted to partner, we were looking deep into their benches and figuring out who was playing on the field in various areas that we were interested in. And so we will come to an institution with a list of PIs that we're interested in talking to and ask for introductions. And that's one way in which we source and begin the diligence process to really better understand the opportunity and if there's a there. But alternatively, once we start talking to these folks, they start talking to their friends, they hear about what we're doing. They may be very interested in really getting therapeutics to patients, but they don't want to go and start their own company, so they come to us. They say, we heard about your model and the opportunity here, whether from our licensing officer. And so they say, look, we've got this really great opportunity here, and we'd love to get your feedback, because as we all well know, both on the panel as well as the folks in the audience, that one of the most valuable pieces of capital here is actually the feedback and the interaction with intellectual capital, financial capital, and really the ability to better understand how to efficiently and rapidly create value here. And so I think that those are kind of the key aspects, but the bigger kind of zooming out perspective, both at Autobahn, in our investors and the larger kind of network that we're pulling on, is the real concept of patient capital. We've been talking a lot about innovation, which brings to mind speed and moving and being nimble all the time. But I think underlying all of this is the respect and understanding that in order to do this well and to do it together, you really need to build deep partnerships and relationships that are meant to last. And so in some cases, when we talk to the investigators, they may have a project that's super interesting, but it's actually almost too early for us, right? They've barely discovered a gene, a target, a mechanism. And so what we want to do is provide that feedback, give them some guidance as to what would make it more attractive or more tenable as an opportunity, and have them come back to us, whether it be in 6 months or 3 years, to say, look, this is what I've developed, and this is where we have a real opportunity to work together. So those are some of the ways that we kind of think about and are able to interact with the different partners and more importantly, individuals within our partner institutions.
Awesome, awesome. So if they're too early for you, we send them to Jlabs maybe. Is that right? So Sanjay, I would love just let's talk a little bit about how you engage with different sorts of academic institutions, both in that push-pull or inbound outbound approach.
Yeah, no. So we're very fortunate here in the region. We've got great local partners and relationships here are second to none. So very tapped into the tech transfer offices and have robust relationships, right? And at the end of the day, Jlabs is viewed as a premier incubator for a kickstart company, right? Coming out of academia, and they're basically rolling out as an entity, and then they kind of roll in to our incubation and get the benefit of being able to mature the company and technology. And really, the relationships here allow us to discuss the needs of the local institutions, but at the same time enable those companies which are at the right scale. And from our vantage point, what are we looking for, right? So just so people are aware, when a company applies here to Jlabs, we do review them, and basically, as a first pass, I'll always look at the technology, go to the science meeting, etc. And then we have an internal review where experts inside also take a look, etc. And really what we're looking to establish in that model is, a way to build relationships between the company and those within. And hopefully, as the company flourishes, whether it's a year or 5 years from now, there may be an opportunity to partner or learn more together, right? That's kind of look at it. So it's very, I'd say, hands off per se, but a chance to establish longer term meaningful relationships that leads to partnering, etc. And from the institutional standpoint, some of the things that we're trying to do, or we have done, is we've actually taken some programming of our own to these institutions. Stories of some of our CEOs and how they actually established a company and became an entrepreneur, etc. And so trying to give back as well, because we're also trying to encourage the next wave of entrepreneurs down here in the region. And as we all know, as they grow and scale out of here, we work closely with Alexandria and others, and they kind of grow, scale, and move on to the next place, etc., to take on the next journey. So from that vantage point, aside of the institutions, I think players like the San Diego Innovation Council, Connect, and everyone else in this local region are critical for how we, as Jlabs or any of the incubation offerings here in the region, interact in the ecosystem. So, fair credit and real admiration for my fellow players in this space in the region. So thank you.
Perfect, thanks. Hallie, you got kind of a slightly different angle as a sort of a venture investor, but how do you build relationships with academic institutions? Is that something where you spend a lot of your time, or are you typically just talking to entrepreneurs after they're outside of the academic world?
I kind of see them along the same spectrum, right? And especially with early stage companies coming out of the institutions, those conversations often start really early. There was a UCSD company that's just spinning out now that, we spoke to the PI for over a year and a half, before, the company even started taking form, right? So I think, when you're with, venture investing in early stage companies, focused at that kind of academic spin out stage, you have to have a lot of patience, and you have to build those relationships over time. And see it as a partnership, right? Because it's really challenging to start a company, and especially companies where, there might be a lot of moving parts in terms of, when's the right time to spin out? How do we build the team? How do we pull in the right executive? As a PI, how much involvement is there in the startup, and what makes, the most sense? So, I think, it's definitely not kind of an in or out type of relationship. I think it's kind of along the spectrum, and oftentimes even once the company has formed, they still have really strong relationships with the institutions, whether it's through sponsored research agreements, whether it's kind of back and forth in terms of the IP that continues to come out of PI's labs. So I think as a venture, and with the venture investor hat on, it's what does that look like in terms of the company being able to really harness, the best technology and, utilize it going forward. And there's lots of ways to structure that. And maybe just to say on with my other hat on, with the real estate hat, we also see those relationships to be incredibly important. We do have some direct relationships with institutions like Columbia, where we have an early stage company space. Also in the Stanford Research Park, we're going to be opening one. And, that really came just from getting to know those ecosystems very deeply and trying to understand what the needs are, right? So if we're going to build out a full ecosystem, what do we need? Where are the gaps? And, those were some of the gaps in terms of supporting those companies at early stages. So I think I was going to say it's kind of a chicken and the egg argument. I liked Michelle's analogy of two, pedals on the bike, right? It's not them coming to you or us going to them. It's just strategically having these long-term relationships and understanding what each party's needs are and where we can best fit in and add value.
Awesome. And Amanda, I imagine some of the relationships that Illumina for Startups is building is you've got a ready customer base in a sense that you have customer relationships with every academic institution on the sequencer side, on the product side, and so does that open the door to your accelerator relationships, or is it more relationship building outside of that kind of system?
I think it's all the above. And what I think is so cool, maybe to build on what Hallie and Michelle were saying, is it takes a village to build a startup, whether it's coming out of university or whether it's spin out from a different group or it's an idea on a whiteboard. And so I love that there's all these engines out there trying to sort of support entrepreneurs. And it's so cool because it's very collaborative. I know, like, for example, we have companies that have gone through, many companies have gone through Jlabs and Lilly Gateway Labs. And I'm sure, Hallie, with Alexandria, I know you guys have invested in a couple of our portfolio companies as well. So it's so cool, like, how all these resources are around and aligned to try to help these entrepreneurs and to really succeed. And so, yeah, the way we connect with entrepreneurs, whether it's coming out of academia or whether it's coming elsewhere, is really through our network, right? And so it's through just the long-term relationships. We'll do a seminar, at UC San Diego, which we did maybe a month or so ago, talking to the various faculty about the idea of creating genomics companies. And we don't expect that to lead to sort of a company today, but it may lead to a company a year and a half from now or 2 years from now, to kind of get the wheels going of maybe I can do this, or maybe the postdoc in the lab wants to think about creating a company in this space. So it is very much sort of a long-term kind of philosophy that you have to have, I think, in this space. But it is really cool to see such a change, I think, over maybe the past decade of academics really sort of prioritizing entrepreneurship. And it's a positive. I think a lot of cases in universities now where faculty are looking for chances to sort of spin out companies or even take a sabbatical and join a startup for a couple of years to kind of see that idea go a little bit further through. So I just love sort of the energy where there's so much entrepreneurial spirit within a lot of the academic organizations these days. So it's really fun. It's really fun to kind of be a part of that. And we've been able to work with a lot of great faculty. We work with spin-outs from Duke or from Berkeley or elsewhere, Stanford, UCSF, and it's really cool to see the different faculty and how they're committed. Some will sort of be a day a week at the startup. Some will be 6 months on a sabbatical. Some will leave their post in academia and go all in and become the CEO of these companies, depending on what their passions lie and what opportunities there are. It's really cool to see. I think this mind shift where entrepreneurialism and sort of startup is sort of like, it's really cool. Not everybody has to have it, but those who do, I think there's a really nurturing and rich environment for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's very much a California attitude, and not just Bay Area, Northern California. I think throughout California, and maybe even more so the kind of the creative approach to academia, entrepreneurship, even big company, small company blending, especially here in Southern California, is so powerful. So it's great to hear your angle on that. And Ajay, I know you mentioned to me, UCSD, UCSF, Sanford Burnham, Priebus, some organizations like that. How did those come about? Are those, how long have those relationships existed? And is that something where you open those doors, or did they come to you?
Yeah, great question. I mean, those are some great examples of some really robust academic partnerships we have in the state of California, and it really is, I think, a two-way street and two-way traffic with sort of a mutual conversation. I think some of them certainly, we may have initiated the conversation, and in others, I think a lot of them it's ideas coming from the academics too. So, I mean, the Sanford Burnham one is a local one in San Diego that's in its 6th year, where we started a really robust dialogue with SVP a few years ago, just as the immuno-oncology revolution was happening. We were really interested, how can the biology of checkpoint receptors be harnessed for immunology? These molecules are, ultimately there to play an important role in our immune system, and we wanted to understand how that would work. So we started a really nice relationship with Sanford Burnham Prebys that has actually resulted in molecules already being in clinical development and being tested in large clinical trials. So it's been a very positive academic partnership. Some of the other ones with UCSD have been to really understand the biology of diseases like rheumatoid arthritis and inflammatory bowel disease. And then another one in California with UCSF, we really want to map the immune system at a fine level. And we realize what we can do, what we're good at, but we really need academic medical centers that have access to patients, have access to human tissues, where we could come up with a very robust collaboration, where we could, generate some really important data for the field over the next few years. And one comment I want to make is, I think just the nature of interaction of especially larger companies like Lilly with academic institutions has really, I think, changed in a positive direction in the last 2 years. I think many years ago, I think sort of we were just a deep pocket with money being thrown over the fence and not necessarily very robust interaction. And maybe a few years later, you get some readouts or some report as to what was done. But some of these relationships that we have with academics, and of course with some of the startups, are really intimate relationships where we meet regularly. It's a collaborative relationship. We both provide input, iterate on the science. It's been, I think, a real positive shift in how companies interact with academia, and I think is really generating some really great results.
I
think
there, see if my system goes. Okay. My computer's too slow for muting and unmuting, but no, terrific. And actually want to switch to I'm going to switch to an audience question, which I think is a really interesting one that leads into sort of evolving business models and next steps. But Michelle, I know you'll lead with this one. But as we think about universities, and let's take universities in Southern California, but I guess if someone is from elsewhere, weigh into. But universities, how can they position themselves to collaborate with you? And Michelle, you've got the great starting point with your new model, but would love to open it up to anyone else after Michelle answers.
Sure. Thanks for the question from Anonymous, whoever you are. But yeah, in this day and age, I think there's just really multiple channels to communicate with each other, right? So I think there's no one right answer. The simple answer is simply to email me directly at michelle@autobahnlabs.com. The alternative answer is really just about, if the institution at large, and if you're asking from an institution perspective, which I think you are, as opposed to an individual perspective, I think what's most helpful for us is we want to be able to do this successfully and create companies and create value. And so, as everyone has alluded to, this is really it's a take a village sort of approach. And so what's helpful on our end, because we like to collaborate both with the faculty members and the institution, is really to highlight the ways in which your institution either has a specialization in particular disease area. Perhaps you have a diabetes center, or you've got some of the greatest clinicians in the world that are working on IPF, for instance. To be able to highlight ways in which your institution is unique and has sort of differentiated capabilities or know-how, or investigators and science that's happening. I think that's one way in which you can position yourselves. The other is from, again, a more practical perspective, which is, how does your institution actually work with their faculty members, have an entrepreneurial ecosystem, and are better able to support all of the efforts that are trying to happen? Because again, we bring certain aspects to the table as Autobahn Labs. We bring the financial, the intellectual, and the physical capital through Evotech. But what's also important is that really there's an open dialogue amongst all the different players as to, where's the unmet need clinically, what are the opportunities, and how do we best identify those programs and those opportunities that are really poised to become successful, because there are large pools, you know, or we're dealing with a distribution, a Gaussian distribution of opportunities. Some of them are super advanced and some of them need a little bit more love. And so what helps us all be successful is if there is a mechanism by which we can filter. We do some of the filtering on our own end. Some institutions have a really robust pipeline and mechanism by which they evaluate and talk to their principal investigators. Maybe they even find out about things that are pre-disclosure, which is also very valuable to us, as opposed to things that may have been sitting on the shelf for a few years. So if there are ways in which your institution is able to just sort of accelerate the process, from our perspective, you know, at Autobahn Labs, we find that to be incredibly helpful. But I think it's really thinking deeply about what your institution brings to the table, and then being able to highlight that to whomever you're speaking with. And that's the way, I think that's the seed or the beginning of a great relationship with any of the folks that are here on the line.
Got it. Anyone else want to have a something to add to that perspective?
I think Michelle captured it well. I mean, it's sort of just pick up the phone or send an email. And I think we've set up a number of great brainstorming sessions with a lot of the academic institutions across California and elsewhere over the last few years, where you really can sort of probe what our areas of commonality are and where we can interact. I think we're really open and excited about those types of interactions. And some of those have de novo resulted in fairly robust, multi-year collaboration. So I think we're definitely looking to hear from academic institutions, and obviously in the setting of startups and with some of our incubator labs too, about potential collaborations.
Yeah, but the same as both of my colleagues here on the panel, you know, one of the things that we try and do at some point every year is basically have a touch point with the tech transfer offices right up and down the region. So at least share what are we interested in, right? That way it allows the institutions to come forward and bring their best science forward that way. And more so, we're really trying to connect through all the touch points we have, right? It's not just Jlabs, we have our innovation centers, etc. I think one of the biggest things, and I'm sure Ajay can attest to this, is there's so many entry points, and I think part of our job as a Bastion is to help direct that individual to the right entry point. And I think that's critical as we build these relationships with entrepreneurs.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that's just to put in a plug for BioscienceLA and for the Alliance for SoCal Innovation and other organizations. That's part of what we're trying to facilitate as well. Is there are so many organizations, entry points, and connections, and so the more that everyone understands sort of who's doing what, how they can engage, and be able to sort of provide that right turbo approach to the right person at the right time, which is going to be different for different sorts of organizations. I think that's that's important. So just we kicked off saying that LA reopened, or California reopened, and things are moving back to normal, but we've definitely seen such a shift in the way people do business, collaborate, live, interact, in general over the past year, and would love just to get a sense of how things are evolving in your organization around that. From virtual organizations like yours, Michelle, to Hallie, obviously you work for a real estate organization to some extent, so there's a physical space. Sanjay, physical space at the Jlabs. But how do you see that kind of virtual collaboration evolving in your organizations? And more importantly, does that open up the opportunity for more academic institutions, more companies to engage in what you're doing?
Absolutely. I think the silver lining to COVID was actually our increased fluency in all things technology, right? So, I mean, all of us have become incredibly adept at navigating calls, Zoom calls, having things going on in the background. And for better or for worse, we've all learned how many calls we can squeeze into a X number of hours a day. So from our perspective, it was actually a welcome surprise, because people were sort of, I think, forced in some ways to have these conversations, and I hope my AirPods don't die on me. I'm swapping yours right now. Have these conversations and be open to things where maybe more traditionally they would have done this face to face. So for us, we have a small team and we are starting to branch out to the East Coast. So really being able to have these calls on a regular basis and have openness has allowed us to expand to more institutions than we would have originally, because we don't necessarily need to have boots on the ground. Our original model was really to spend a lot more time on campus, meeting people face to face, having those initial coffees or conversations. And what we've now realized is that perhaps your typical introverts are now more open to having these calls, because it's not like they have to welcome you into the office. They don't have to involve a commute time or be present in a loud or unusual environment. So for us, it's been really great. I think that also the fact that one of our key partners is based in Europe, we've been forced to go virtual, and that will definitely persist even after we start traveling and visiting people in person. But that connectivity has really been one of the bright elements of the last 18 months or so.
Got it. Hallie?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think particularly with wet lab work, it's been such an interesting year because scientists can't do chemistry in their garage, or it's not recommended, right? So, thinking about how teams are structured in a safe way, and AJ, you've probably had to operationalize this, firsthand and under kind of critical timelines, particularly with COVID antibodies and other critical programs. But I've just been so impressed by how our tenants and investments have figured out how to be, I would say, just or more productive in a really challenging time. And whether it's shifts or making sure that people can work around their kids' school schedules, right? Just having that amount of flexibility, but showing that these teams can, at least speaking for our team, we have been more productive this past year. It is just going to show how, I guess, innovative, right, companies can be when they need to, get really mission critical work done, right? Just, the fact that, biotechs have really come to front and center with COVID and getting us out of this pandemic, I think really goes to show what organizations can do. So, I really hope to see some of the things that we've learned move forward. I think, being able to have a lot of meetings virtually, just to minimize, some of that commute time, and then having in-person meetings strategically where it makes sense, right? I think I'm kind of at the beginning now, but I've had a couple of in-person meetings, and it is really impactful. It's so wonderful to see people in person. So I think just, being a little bit more strategic in how we spend our times and how we structure teams.
Excellent. I'm reminded that back in February 2020, you promised me lunch in Pasadena. So I collect on that lunch.
That's right. It's still on our to-do list.
Exactly. Anyone else have different perspectives on that?
Well,
I guess especially
to it. I think maybe it's building off of what Hallie and Michelle were saying, but I think maybe two things. I agree that there's like this major sense of urgency that we've all sort of benefited from, and sort of are doubling down on sort of this field, right? And so it's a really, really cool time to be, even if we're not directly working in COVID, any one company. I think it's just really cool to see sort of everybody sort of now sort of dinner table conversations about sort of biotech and science, and like that's really, really cool. That I hope that it stays at least to some extent with this increased urgency. And I think the second one is sort of, as Michelle, you were saying too, sort of the being able to not have to sort of be on the ground, but be able to connect folks. And I think that's something that we've been able to do this past year plus, which is sort of expand globally during the pandemic. So we opened up a site June last year in UK. We're opening up a site in this fall in Shanghai. We just are in the process of hiring an entrepreneurial fellow on the ground in Australia. And so how cool is that you can do that? And I haven't been on a plane to sort of hire any of those folks, or sort of, well, before, of course, I was traveling a lot, but it's really cool that you can do so much, almost like it flattens the world a little bit, realizing that Zoom is super powerful. And yeah.
To build on that, just to come back to your opening question, right? Scientific innovation matters. I think the pandemic really highlighted that, and the fact that we were able to keep going and allow entrepreneurs who are innovating on the front lines to keep going safely really mattered. And science became in vogue at this moment in time. I mean, for all of the negative press, perhaps we've seen, I think people are really realizing the benefits of innovation here, and we've all been benefactors. And just seeing how the scientists even here at Jlabs have just continued throughout this pandemic, but in a safe way, enabled in a safe way. Now the teams around, from my own team, except enabled that and are willing to be on the front line. That sense of camaraderie to enable that to occur, I think for me is just second to none. And I think we've got to keep that spirit going all around. Don't lose faith and don't lose that spirit, I would say.
I mean, from my perspective, clearly a transformative year, and we showed we can be productive, in the setting of a world emergency using technology. But I hope the future holds the best of the old and the best of the new. I mean, I can't wait to be back in our beautiful Alexandria site in a couple of months and seeing people in person again, and also just figuring out what's sustainable for the future. I think the technology is allowing us to have a lot more touch points, but some of these relationships scientifically and otherwise need to go deeper. So it's in the end of the day, having those sort of flow into meaningful face-to-face relationships where you can really have a deep dive with someone. And I think nobody's vision for the future is you're on Zoom calls every 30 minutes from 7 in the morning till 8 at night. I think it's more like a little, it's great to take advantage of that to make touch points, but I think some deeper in-person encounters and relationship, everyone's looking forward to those returning also.
Yeah, absolutely. As I'm guessing Andy's going to come back on in a minute here to send us off on our day. I'm reminded that Andy Wilson and I have never actually met in person, and we've now worked on I don't know how many events together, and collaborating on some really interesting innovation investment programs and things like that. So you're next on my Pasadena list as well, Andy. So I'll have to make a trip out just for a bunch of lunches. But this has been a really fabulous conversation. I think we probably could spend another hour or two talking about many more topics around this. But hopefully that means there's some opportunities to bring this group together again. I'm looking forward to doing continuing to do work and doing more work with all this group. So. BioscienceLA wants to be a resource here in Los Angeles for everything that this entire group is doing. Obviously, the Alliance for SoCal Innovation, likewise up and down the state. So thank you all, panelists. Thank you, audience. Andy, are you going